Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever picked up something that felt um, like a blueprint? Or maybe like a secret code?
Yeah, but not for, like, a building or some complex machine.
Right, exactly. For a story. Maybe you've seen one online, or maybe you're thinking about writing for the screen yourself. When you actually look at that page, what's the very, very first thing that jumps out?
Often it's just a couple of words, right? Sitting there, maybe kind of alone at the top.
Yeah.
And they're signaling something important, that something is about to kick off.
Yeah, a signal. It's like the formal invitation, isn't it? Into the world the writers created.
That's a great way to put it. A small instruction, but it carries significant weight in setting the stage.
Exactly. And that idea, the idea of a formal invitation, of setting the stage using a very specific, almost coded language, well, that's what we're deep diving into today. We're peeling back the layers on the absolute foundational language of filmmaking, the screenplay itself.
hmm
Forget the big themes or the actors for just a second. We're looking right down at the granular level, the essential building blocks.
The nuts and bolts that every single cinematic story is constructed with.
And to help us navigate this, you, our listener, have provided a really fantastic piece of source material.
Yeah, it's titled The Basics of a Screenplay, FAEN and more. And it's great because it offers such a clear starting point, for anyone who's curious about how a movie script actually works right from page one. It focuses on those initial crucial elements.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward.
Hmm.
We're going to take that source, unpack these fundamental things. It highlights, terms like AVN, scene headings, action descriptions, dialogue, those little transitions.
All the core components.
Exactly.
Eh.
And not just understand what they are, but really get into why mastering them is so critical for telling a story visually, cinematically.
It's about equipping yourself, you, the listener, to understand the structure, the language of screen storytelling.
Seeing how the movies you love actually begin their life as this very specific kind of document
Yeah.
on the page.
Yeah, and appreciating that, before the director ever yells action, before any actor memorizes a line, before the sets are even thought about, let alone built,
Right.
there's this document. And it's meticulously formatted.
Meticulously is the word.
And that structure, it isn't just about looking neat, is it? It's fundamentally about clear, efficient communication. Think about it. Dozens, maybe hundreds of people need to take those words and turn them into moving images and sound. That format is key.
I'm actually really excited to get into this because, honestly, screenplay format can seem a bit dry from the outside.
Just rules on a page, yeah.
But when you understand why those rules exist, what they actually do for the story, for the crew, for everyone involved,
Yeah.
that's where it gets really fascinating.
It unlocks the logic behind it.
Precisely. And this source gives us that perfect starting point, highlighting the absolute non-negotiables. So let's start decoding this blueprint.
Let's do it.
Okay, so our source material kicks us off right at the very beginning, like literally the beginning. It makes it super clear that one of the very first things you'll encounter when you open up a screenplay, I mean, right after the title page, obviously, which isn't covered here, but that's where you'd have the title, the writer's name.
Right, the standard stuff.
The first instruction you often see is "fade in," usually all caps, sometimes with a colon after it.
That's right. Fade in, just sitting there. And it's definitely not just, decoration. The source calls it the gateway to your story.
A gateway. I like that metaphor. It feels right.
It literally signals the start of the cinematic experience right there on the page.
So the source defines it technically as a transitional instruction, which sounds a bit formal maybe.
A little bit, yeah.
But what does that single instruction, those two words, what do they really signal to the person reading it and eventually the person watching?
Well, it signals the method, the way the visual world of the story first appears to the audience. In classic film terms, a fade in is exactly what it sounds like. The screen starts black, and then the image gradually, smoothly brightens until you see the first shot clearly.
Ah, okay, like dimming the lights up.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
putting 80 in on the page is telling the reader, okay, picture a black screen. Now slowly, the first image is emerging. It's inherently cinematic right from word one. It's already dictating a specific visual effect.
So it's doing more work than just saying, okay, start here.
Mm-hmm.
It's giving a specific visual cue about how the story begins its visual life.
Mm-hmm.
The source really emphasizes its significance. It tells the reader the opening scene is beginning and calls it a cinematic cue.
Absolutely. It's basically saying prepare for the visual experience. Before you even read the description of what's in that first shot, fade in primes your mind. It shifts you. You're not just reading an opening paragraph like in a novel anymore.
You're anticipating a visual reveal.
Exactly. And the source makes a great comparison here. It says, think of fading in as the opening shot of your movie.
That's a powerful way to put it because the opening shot in any film is so deliberate, isn't it? It's never random.
Ever.
It sets the mood, the setting, maybe the genre, sometimes hints a character theme right away.
All of that.
So fading in on the page does something similar by dictating the feel of that arrival. Suggests maybe a gentle emergence, or perhaps something mysterious, depending on what follows.
Compared to, say, just cutting straight in, which feels very different, more abrupt.
Right. A fade implies a certain pace, a deliberate unfolding.
Its purpose is exactly that. Mark the absolute beginning of the narrative flow on the page using a specific film technique. And yes, subtly influence that initial tone. It's like a gentle hand guiding you, the reader, across the threshold into the story world.
So, for you listening, when you see a fade in a script, your brain should immediately shift gears. You're not just reading prose anymore. You're being told, okay, the imaginary projector is warming up, the screen is coming to life, prepare for the first visual impression, and it's going to emerge slowly.
It's such a concise command, but it's powerful. It grounds the entire reading experience in the language of film from the get-go.
Just 2 words and a colon, but as the source says, vital. It initiates you into that intended cinematic experience.
Couldn't have said it better.
Okay, so the screen has gracefully faded in from black. We're officially in the first scene, but where are we? And when is this happening?
The next crucial piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. That's the immediate next chunk of information the reader absolutely needs. And it's provided by what our source calls the scene heading.
Yes. Usually right after that, fade in, or sometimes just at the top of a new page if it's not the very first scene, or after another transition, you get the scene heading. This element instantly roots the reader, gives you your bearings in the physical space and the time of the narrative.
Roots the reader, yeah. And the source points out they also go by another name, a common industry term.
Correct. Slug lines. Scene headings or slug lines, you'll hear both used pretty interchangeably.
Slug lines, got it.
They serve as the narrative's GPS coordinates. The source uses that analogy, and I think it's spot on. They provide essential orientation.
GPS coordinates, that's fantastic, really paints a picture of their function. And the source breaks down the format, which is, as you said earlier about formatting in general, quite strict.
Very strict. It must start with either INT or EXT. Always capitalized, always followed by a period.
INT or EXT, and that stands for?
INT is interior, meaning the scene takes place indoors. EXT is exterior, meaning outdoors.
Okay, simple enough.
Simple, but crucial. Not just for you, the reader, visualizing it, but think about production. Indoor shoots mean different lighting, sound considerations, maybe set building. Outdoor shoots mean weather, location scouting, natural light. It's the most basic logistical flag for the entire crew.
Makes sense. Then, right after the INT, or EXT, and its period, comes a specific location.
Yep. And the source notes this can be anything from something really specific, like Jane's kitchen, to something vast, like Sahara Desert, or even, outer space.
So the scale can vary wildly.
Totally. The key is clarity and, again, conciseness within the slug line itself. It needs to tell you where you are clearly enough to form a mental image. You don't need flowery descriptions in the heading. Just name the place. Are we in a basement, a park, a spaceship bridge? The reader needs to know.
Gotcha. And the final piece, after a dash, is the time of day. The source mentions the 2 main ones are day or night.
Those cover probably 95% of scenes. They're the workhorses. Occasionally, you might see dawn or dusk, maybe even later if it's the same location but time has passed within the same broad day-night period, or a specific time like 3:00 a.m. if that exact time is absolutely critical to the plot.
But generally day or night.
Generally day or night, and this tells you when, which immediately impacts mood, lighting, obviously potential activity levels. Think about it. A bustling city street during the day feels completely different than the same street at night.
Totally different vibe. So combining all those pieces, the source gives us that clear example. INT, library night.
4 simple elements formatted just so.
And look how much information that packs in instantly.
Right. We are inside INT. We're in a library-specific location, and it's happening at night, the time. In just those, 4 components, you have a strong mental image, quiet, probably dimly lit, maybe echoing slightly, an interior space in the evening. It's incredibly efficient communication.
It really is. And the source hammers home their vital role, calls them essential information for the reader and the production team. That distinction feels important.
It is. They orient you, the reader, helping you follow the story's flow through different places and times. But for the production crew, they are absolutely indispensable.
You couldn't make the movie without them.
Literally couldn't schedule it or budget it. The assistant director, the production manager, they need to break down the script based on these headings. How many INT, day scenes? How many EXT, night T scenes?
Affects everything.
Everything. Location scouting, lighting setups, sound recording, actor calls. They literally guide the entire logistical nightmare, process of making the film.
So they truly guide navigation through the story's different settings, both for us, reading it, visualizing the world, and for the crew physically making it happen.
Nailed it. So for you listening, whether you're reading a script just to understand a film better, or maybe you're thinking about writing one, understanding scene headings is step one in clarity and efficiency. It's the standard, universal way to tell everyone, instantly, where and when are we. It's maybe the most non-negotiable formatting rule because its purpose is just so intensely practical.
Okay, practicality's nailed down. We faded in. We know precisely where and when we are, thanks to that slug line. We're inside that library at night. Now, what do we actually see? What do we hear in that space? What is happening?
Right. Now we get to the description.
Which brings us to the element that typically follows the scene heading, the action descriptions.
Also called action lines, scene description, a couple of names for it. But yeah, this is where the visual and auditory world of the screenplay really starts to get painted on the page. These are the prose sections. They describe everything the audience is going to see and hear, basically, apart from the dialogue itself.
The source states their main job is to provide a vivid description of what the audience will see and hear. So this is the writer's chance, right? To paint that picture of the environment, introduce characters visually, describe their movements, maybe important sounds.
All of that. And the source gives us some really crucial guidelines for writing effective action descriptions. Because you can definitely do it ineffectively.
Oh, I bet. What's the first rule it mentions?
Using the present tense.
Okay. So writing like Sarah walks to the bookshelf, not Sarah walked to the bookshelf.
Exactly.
And the source says, this creates a sense of immediacy. Why is that immediacy so important here?
Because film unfolds in the present moment, right? When you're watching a movie, you're seeing things happen now. By writing the action in the present tense, the screenwriter pulls the reader into that same feeling, that real-time experience. It makes the script feel dynamic, alive, like the movie is unspooling on the page as you read it.
It's not a report of something that happened.
Precisely. It's a description of the ongoing present, what the camera is capturing right now.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second guideline from the source?
Using the active voice. The example they give is preferring Sarah drives the car over something like the car is being driven by Sarah.
Right. Active versus passive. Why the preference for
Active voice is generally just stronger, isn't it? More direct. And usually uses fewer words.
Conciseness again.
Always coming back to conciseness in screenwriting. Because, that rough guide of 1 page equals 1 minute of screen time is always lurking in the background. Active voice keeps the writing punchy, efficient. It clearly states who is doing the action, which is usually what you need to know right away. Keeps it dynamic, as the source puts it.
And that ties right into the third key piece of advice mentioned, conciseness itself. A source really stresses focusing only on the most important visual and auditory details. Avoid the fluff.
This is huge, and it's one of the biggest shifts if you're coming from, say, writing novels.
How so?
Well, in a novel, you can spend pages on internal thoughts, feelings, descriptions of smells, textures, backstory, stuff that just doesn't translate easily or at all to a visual medium.
Right. You can't film a smell, usually.
Exactly. So action descriptions have to focus ruthlessly on what the camera can actually see and what the microphone can hear. Every word has to earn its place. You have to ask, is this detail essential for the plot, for understanding the character, for establishing the setting or the mood? If not, cut it.
Ruthless.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Overly long, flowery action lines just slow down the read, they bog things down, and often they contain stuff that the director or actors can't even use.
So the goal, as the source puts it, is to paint a clear picture and transport the reader into the world, but do it efficiently. Be evocative, but selective.
Perfectly put. Effective action lines let the reader vividly visualize the scene, who's there, what are they doing, what does the place look like, what important sounds are there, without drowning them in unnecessary prose. They give the essential sensory info that the director, the cinematographer, the production designer, the actors Everyone needs to build that scene visually and orally. They convey the essence of the scene, its fundamental look and feel.
So for you listening, the way action is described is literally the lens you first see the story's world through on the page. Is it a chaotic, noisy marketplace described with sharp, specific sounds and quick movements? Or is it a stark, empty room with just the sound of dripping water?
The action lines dictate that movie playing in your head long before anyone even speaks a word.
They're the silent narration, telling us what the camera's seeing.
That's it.
Okay, so we've set the scene with the heading. We've described the world and the actions within it using those concise, present tense, active voice action lines. Now, we probably need to know what the characters are actually saying in that library at night.
Right, time for dialogue.
Which the source highlights as, well, a primary engine of the screenplay. Makes sense.
Absolutely. It's how characters express who they are, how they reveal information, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, how they bounce off each other, and critically, how they push the plot forward.
And the formatting for dialogue is, again, very distinct, very standardized, designed for instant clarity. The source breaks it down. First up, the character's name.
Yes. The character's name gets typed in all capital letters, and it's centered on the page, directly above the words they're going to speak. And the source rightly points out this formatting visually separates dialogue chunks from the action description, which runs wider across the page.
That centering is so simple, but yeah, incredibly effective visually. Your eye just knows, okay, switching from description to speech, and this is who's talking.
Instantly. Which is vital when you're reading, especially in a scene with, say, 3 or 4 people talking. You need to track that conversation quickly.
Keeps it scannable, helps you quickly identify the speaker, as the source says.
Exactly. Then, directly underneath that centered, all caps name, you get the block of text that is the dialogue itself, the actual words the character speaks. And notice that this dialogue block is narrower than the action lines. It's indented on both sides, creates more white space around it, again, visually distinct.
Right. And the source doesn't just cover the look of dialogue, it gives some crucial advice on the quality. 3 key things it stresses.
What are they?
Keep it concise, make it natural sounding,
Yeah.
and make sure it's true to the character's voice.
Okay, let's unpack those a bit. Concise, there's that word again.
Always.
Because of the page per minute thing, yeah. But also, just good storytelling. Every line should ideally be doing some work. Is it moving the plot, revealing something about the character, conveying necessary info? If not, maybe it doesn't need to be there.
Get to the point.
Pretty much. Then, natural sounding. This is tricky. It doesn't mean literally transcribing how people talk with all the ums and ahs and rambling. That can be incredibly dull to read or listen to.
Right, real talk can be boring.
It really can. Natural sounding means dialogue that feels authentic to the character speaking it and authentic to the situation they're in. Even if the situation is extraordinary or the language is a bit heightened or stylized for effect, does it feel real coming out of that character's mouth?
Okay, authenticity within the context.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the third point. True to the character's voice. This is huge. Every character should sound distinct, shouldn't they?
Ideally, yeah.
Their dialogue should reflect who they are, their personality, their background, education level, their current emotional state, what they want. All of that should subtly inform the words they choose, the way they structure sentences.
A good test, sometimes, is if you covered up the character names, could you still tell who is speaking?
That's a fantastic test. If all your characters sound the same, you've got a problem.
So the source provides a very, very simple example just to show the formatting.
Let's hear it.
Joe A. Chen. Hello, Sarah. How are you today? Sarah?
I'm doing well, John. Thanks for asking. Super basic, but yeah. You see the centered names in caps. You see the dialogue block underneath, indented. That's the fundamental visual structure for every single bit of spoken text in the script.
And echoing the source again, the key function, beyond just sounding good, is that dialogue should always be working to reveal character and move the story forward.
If it's not doing at least one of those things, preferably both.
It probably needs a rethink. Cut it or rewrite it.
That's usually the case. So for you, the listener, reading a script, this clear formatting just makes following the conversation effortless. You always know who's saying what. But beyond that, the quality advice, concise, natural, character-specific, that's what makes the characters leap off the page and makes the story actually engaging. Do these people sound believable? Do their interactions crackle? Dialogue is their main tool for that.
But wait, characters aren't always speaking lines neutrally, are they? Sometimes they deliver lines with a specific emotion, or maybe they're doing something small while they speak. How does a screenwriter get that extra layer of nuance across within the dialogue section?
Ugh, good question. That's where things like parentheticals and sometimes certain character directions come into play. These little additions, as the source describes them, provide additional context for dialogue. They add those layers of meaning or indicate specific actions that are tied directly to the spoken lines.
Okay, let's tackle parentheticals first. As the name kind of suggests, they're written inside parentheses.
Yep.
And the source is very specific about where they go, between the character name and the dialogue line.
Exactly. So page layout. You have the centered character name in caps. Then, on the next line down, indented slightly, inside parentheses, you have the parenthetical. Then on the line below that, you have the actual dialogue.
Got it. Name, then parenthetical, then dialogue, and their purpose, according to the source.
Is to describe the character's tone, mood, or actions while speaking. Key phrase there, while speaking.
Okay. The source gives a nice, simple example. Sarah, smiling. I'm so glad to see you again.
Perfect. See, the parenthetical smiling isn't dialogue, Sarah says. It's an instruction about how she delivers that line. Without it, I'm so glad to see you again could be read a bunch of ways, right? Sarcastic, maybe relieved, maybe even sad if the context was different.
Could be anything.
But adding nails down the intended emotion for that specific moment. It clarifies the performance beat. It's small, but it can be really powerful information for the actor and director.
But, and this seems important, the source also gives a strong guideline here. Use them sparingly. Use them only when necessary to clarify the intended emotion. Why the warning? Why be sparing?
That's a really key piece of advice. There are a few solid reasons for it. First, just practically, overuse makes the page look cluttered. It can slow down the read, make it feel choppy.
Well, it's messy.
Can do, yeah. But second, and maybe more importantly from a creative standpoint, screenwriters are generally told not to direct from the page too much. Don't micromanage the actor.
Trust the collaborators.
Exactly. A good line of dialogue, especially when combined with strong action description leading up to it, should often imply the emotion or the necessary action. You hire talented actors for their interpretation, right? You don't want to dictate every single raised eyebrow or sigh.
So the parenthetical is really for when the line is genuinely ambiguous without it.
That's the ideal use case. Or when a specific action must accompany the line for the plot to make sense. If the line itself or the preceding action already makes it crystal clear they're angry, you probably don't need to add angrily. Let the actor act.
So it's about clarity where ambiguity would hurt the story, but otherwise, yeah, trusting the actor and director to bring their own craft to it.
It's a fine line, a balancing act. Now, the source also mentions character directions. Sometimes these can overlap a bit with parentheticals in function or be used slightly differently. The specific example given is OS.
Right, and it shows it used right after the character name, like John, OS. What's that telling us?
OS is a standard abbreviation. It stands for off-screen or sometimes off-camera, meaning the character, John in this case, is speaking, but we don't see him in the shot right now. His physical presence isn't visible within the current frame.
Okay, so he could be in the next room,
Mm-hmm.
or shouting from downstairs, or just outside the camera's view.
Any of those. He's present orally, but not visually at that moment.
And the example line that goes with it is, we should hurry, the bus is about to leave.
So you read John, OS, and then that line, and you instantly understand, okay, we hear John saying this urgent thing, but we don't see him. Maybe we see the person he's talking to reacting.
That tells you a lot about the scene's geography, the blocking, probably the camera placement.
Absolutely. It's essential context for the reader visualizing it, and definitely for the director planning the shots. And the guideline here, much like with action lines, is keep these concise and directly relevant. Just what's needed to clarify the context of the line within the scene.
These little elements, parentheticals, these OS-type directions, they add such crucial layers, don't they? They seem to bridge that gap between just reading the words on the page and really imagining the full performance, the scene's dynamics.
They absolutely do. They're the screenwriter's toolkit for adding those necessary performance notes or those spatial cues like off-screen sound that are vital for picturing the scene as a piece of film, not just, a transcript or a stage play.
So for you listening, paying attention to these details helps build a much richer, more accurate mental movie. You can better picture the characters' emotions, their subtext as they speak, or understand the spatial relationships, like why you hear a voice but don't see the person.
They add depth, they clarify intent, they're the subtextual nudges, often tucked away in parentheses.
Okay, this is great. We've journeyed through building a single scene now, piece by piece. from the initial ADE in, establishing the crucial where and when with the scene heading, painting the picture with action lines, giving characters their voice through dialogue, and adding those important nuances with parentheticals and directions.
We've constructed a scene on paper.
But a movie isn't just one scene, is it? It's a whole sequence of them.
Yeah.
So how do we get from the end of our library scene to whatever comes next in the story? How does the script signal that movement?
Right. That's where transitions come in. As the source explains, transitions are specific formatting instructions. Their job is to indicate scene changes or shifts in focus. They're the signposts telling the reader how the story moves from the end point of one scene to the starting point of the next one.
Now, the source makes a really interesting point right away. It says transitions are, well, they're not always necessary.
Yeah, that can seem a bit weird at first glance.
Right. If you need to get from scene A to scene B, surely you need something to indicate that. Why wouldn't they always be needed?
Because the absolute default way to move from one shot or one scene to the next in filmmaking is just a simple, instantaneous cut.
Just a straight cut, like hitting the next track button.
Exactly. So when you finish reading the action and dialogue of one scene, and the very next thing on the page is a brand new scene heading, like EXT BUS stop day, the default assumption is that you just cut directly from the last image of the library scene to the first image of the bus stop scene.
So the cut is implied by the new scene heading.
Precisely. It's the invisible standard transition. You don't need to write CITTO between every single scene heading in the script. It would just clutter things up unnecessarily.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. The cut is the baseline. So explicitly writing a transition like CTTO is then used strategically.
That's the word. The source says they can be used to emphasize specific moments or changes in the story's rhythm.
So you use it when you want to draw attention to the shift.
Exactly. While just jumping to a new scene heading implies a cut, explicitly writing seek with TO, usually aligned to the right margin, can add emphasis. It signals a deliberate, perhaps abrupt shift. The source says it shows a direct change in action or location. You might use it, for example, if you cut from a really quiet, intimate moment straight to something loud and chaotic. The explicit CTO underscores that sudden, jarring change. It helps control the rhythm and the impact of that jump.
Makes the cut feel sharper and more intentional.
Yes. And the source also mentions another common transition, fade out. We started with fade in, is fade out just for the very, very end of the movie. Well, yes, it is traditionally used right at the end of the entire screenplay. You'll often see fade out followed by the end. But interestingly, the source lists it here alongside cut to under the heading of transitions used for scene changes.
So you can use it between scenes too.
You can. Just like fade in suggests that gradual appearance from black, fade out suggests the opposite, a gradual disappearance of the image into blackness.
So writing fade out at the very end of our library scene would tell the reader
that the image of the library, whatever the final shot is, will slowly fade away until the screen is completely black. Then the next scene, EXT BUS stop day perhaps, would begin maybe with its own fade in or maybe just cutting in from black.
Okay. And why would a writer choose to do that between scenes instead of a cut?
It's used much less often between scenes than a cut, definitely, but it's very effective for controlling pace and tone. A fade out can give a sense of finality to a scene, maybe let an emotional moment linger a bit longer in the darkness. Or it's often used to indicate a more significant passage of time between the scene that fades out and the scene that follows. That moment of black screen creates a pause, a beat. It creates a different rhythm than a sharp, immediate cut.
So COTTO is the default, often implied, but can be used explicitly for sharp, immediate jumps. And fade out indicates the gradual disappearance to black, used more strategically for tone, finality, or suggesting time passing between scenes.
That sums it up nicely. These transitions, when the writer chooses to explicitly use them, are conscious decisions. They're about controlling the pace, the feel, the connection, or maybe the deliberate disconnection between different moments in the story. They're formatting instructions, yeah, but they directly impact the cinematic rhythm the writer is trying to create on the page.
So for you listening, think about how different movies feel. Some are all rapid-fire cuts, feeling energetic or maybe fragmented. Others use slower dissolves or fades, feeling more languid or perhaps dreamlike. Even just seeing cut to versus fade out written on the page gives you a little preview of that intended rhythm. A script peppered with explicit CTOS is likely aiming for a faster pace than one that uses occasional fade OS.
Those little formatted words tucked away are essentially directing the underlying heartbeat of the film's eventual edit.
They're like the editor's first set of instructions, embedded right there in the script, telling them how to guide our eyes and our minds from one moment to the next.
Well put.
So, wow. We've really journeyed through the core elements presented in this source material, haven't we? Right from that very first AD in
The gateway.
to establishing where and when with scene headings, painting the picture with action, giving characters their voice with dialogue, adding those crucial nuances with parentheticals and directions.
And finally, understanding how we move between scenes with transitions like CTTO and Febidu out.
We've covered the fundamental components, the standard language of screenplay format as laid out in our source.
Yeah, the absolute basics.
And the big takeaway, I think, from the source and from our chat is that these elements aren't just, arbitrary rules. They're not just hoops for writers to jump through.
Not at all.
They collectively form the foundation upon which a cinematic narrative is built. They are the structural skeleton, and they're the communication protocol for visual storytelling.
They really provide a universal language, don't they? A script written using this standard format, anywhere in the world pretty much, can be picked up and understood by filmmakers. It ensures everyone involved in turning those words into a movie, from the producer to the director to the set designer to the editor, is working from the same clear, functional blueprint.
It absolutely hammers home that screenwriting is its own specific craft. It's distinct from writing a novel or a play or anything else. And mastering these, let's face it, sometimes technical seeming fundamentals goes hand in hand with the creative storytelling part. That's what the source implies, too.
Definitely. It's not about the rules constraining creativity. It's about understanding how to use those rules effectively to translate the amazing story you have in your head into a format that can actually become a movie.
It's like architecture, maybe.
How so?
Well, architects have to understand physics, engineering principles, building codes. Those are the rules, right?
Sure, the constraints of reality.
But understanding and applying those rules is exactly what allows them to design incredibly diverse, complex, sometimes breathtaking structures.
Okay, I see the parallel.
Screenwriting format feels similar. It provides the necessary framework, the structure, that allows for creative expression within the specific medium of cinema.
That's a great analogy. The format provides the container and the instructions for visualization.
While the story and characters fill it. And the source actually hints that learning format is just step one. It mentions what comes next in its own exploration.
Which is?
Focusing on the critical aspect of crafting compelling characters. Calls them the driving force behind a successful screenplay.
Which makes perfect sense as a next step, because ultimately, while the format is the essential container, the instructions for how to build the thing, it's the story, and especially the characters within that story, that actually engage us emotionally, intellectually. That's what makes us care.
You can have a perfectly formatted script with, cardboard cutout characters.
And it'll probably fall flat.
Yeah.
But you still need that foundational formatting so your compelling characters and gripping story can even be understood and produced in the first place.
It shows there's always more to learn, always a deeper dive to be had in the craft. But you absolutely have to start with understanding this basic language.
You have to build the foundation before you can build the house. And this source gives a great overview of those foundational bricks.
Echoing its encouragement. Keep writing, keep reading scripts, keep exploring.
Absolutely. Pay attention to how stories are constructed on the page.
So let's try and pull together the key insights from this deep dive based on our source material. The main thing is, screenwriting is this highly specialized form of writing where the presentation, the format, is just as crucial as the narrative content itself.
They're inseparable for the purpose it serves.
It's all about translating a story into a practical, visual, and auditory blueprint. Every single element we talked about.
FAEEN.
Announcing our arrival. Scene headings.
Placing us in space and time.
Action lines.
Showing us what's happening.
Dialogue.
Letting the characters speak.
Parentheticals.
Adding those crucial delivery notes.
And transitions.
Moving us through the story's flow.
Each one serves a deliberate, functional purpose, guiding the reader and eventually the whole film crew towards experiencing the story as a potential film.
It's a format that's been optimized over decades, really, for efficiency and clear communication, specifically tailored for the collaborative chaos that is filmmaking.
And that leads us nicely into a final thought we wanted to leave you with. Something to mull over, building on this whole idea of format as a tool for visualization. Consider this. How these standard, sometimes quite rigid formatting rules, the ones dictating exactly what you see, action, what you hear, dialogue sounds in action, and where and when you are scene headings, how they actually work by constraining the reader's imagination.
Hmm. Constraining it. How do you mean?
Well, they don't really allow for the kind of free-ranging internal monologue you get in novels, right? Or abstract descriptions of feelings or detailed sensory stuff like smells or tastes.
True. It's very focused on the external, the observable, what can be recorded.
Exactly. By limiting the reader's imaginative input almost exclusively to visual and auditory information, the format does something paradoxical.
Okay.
It creates the necessary conditions for a shared imaginative experience. It forces everyone reading it onto roughly the same visual and auditory page.
Ah, so the limitations enable the collaboration.
Kind of, yeah. It creates a collective vision that can then be translated, hopefully, into a concrete film that many people experience in a similar way.
Mm.
So how does this intense focus on the external, this typical exclusion of deep internal thought or non-visual senses,
Yeah.
how does that fundamentally shape the kind of stories screenwriting is best equipped to tell?
It forces the storytelling outwards, doesn't it? Things have to be shown, demonstrated through action and dialogue, rather than just explained internally by a narrator. Subtext becomes key.
It's a fascinating constraint, really, and it unlocks this unique, powerful form of visual storytelling. So maybe next time you pick up a script, or honestly, even just next time you watch a movie, try to see the ghost of that screenplay format hovering underneath it all.
See the structure beneath the surface.
Yeah. Think about how that initial fade in, or maybe it was a CIN, brought you into the world. How the scene changes, dictated by those headings, moved you through locations. How the action lines showed you what was happening, frame by frame. And how the dialogue, maybe with subtle hints from parentheticals you can now imagine, guided the performances you saw.
The blueprint is always there, isn't it? Informing the final structure, the rhythm, the whole feel of the film.
It really is. Well, a huge thank you for bringing this source material to light and joining us for this deep dive into the fundamental language, the very DNA of cinema.
It was genuinely a pleasure exploring these essential building blocks with you. Hope it was useful for everyone listening.
We certainly hope you feel a little more equipped now to decode some of the magic behind the movies. Until next time.